So we've been talking about dating relationships. We're going to dip our toe into marital relationships as well today. I've got to be, maybe a little careful. This is going out on YouTube, and I'll keep it as YouTube friendly as I can. So we talked about how college is not a real life setting. Living in dorms and eating bad food from the cafeteria, and everyone living in that small area together. That's not the way you're going to live for the rest of your life. But it is a place where you can get to know. It's easy to get to know people and to see what kind of a person you might want to date, what you might want to marry. And I think even Shelley says this, that the likelihood of finding your future mate in high school is slim. But after high school, college, career kind of time, that's a much more likely place that you'll find that person. And then don't settle for less than the best. If you want a relationship so bad that you'll date anyone, that's a problem. Or you'll date someone you probably shouldn't date, that's a problem. You need to respect yourself enough to say, no. There's a guy that in Colorado and I used to stay late there as well, that he would come after school, after practices were over, and would lift weights. And that's all I knew of him. I don't think I even knew his name. And I was in the office working on something as he was leaving, probably 8 o'clock at night. And he walks in and he asks me out for a date. And I said, no. And he said, why? And I said, because I don't know you. I'm not so, desperate for a date that I'm going to go on a date with some stranger. Don't settle for less. Don't say, well, look, I'm 25. I need to get married, so this guy wants to marry me, so I'll marry him. That's not a reason to get married. At least not a good reason to get married. And then guard your heart. We talked about that. Not getting too close, too intimate, both physically and emotionally, too fast. And that happens on the intimacy, like the relational intimacy. Women are more prone for that. On the physical intimacy side of it is usually the bigger problem for the young men. So guard your heart. Don't put your heart in a place that it's going to get hurt. You may get hurt, but you don't need to do something stupid to get your heart hurt. So we talked a little bit about marriage. We talked about the 50-50 sort of lie. And I didn't talk about this, though. I know I told you the story about my college friends, so I don't need to talk about that now. But faithfulness in marriage, most people think you get married and then you're faithful to your spouse from then on out. And that's true. I mean, I stood up in front of I don't know how many hundreds of people and said, I, Amy, take you, Jeff, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I do promise and covenant before God and these witnesses to be your loving and faithful wife. That's weighty, right? I do promise and covenant before God and hundreds of witnesses to be your loving and faithful wife. So yeah, fidelity does go forward after marriage, but fidelity also is before marriage. You're being faithful to, once you're married, you're being faithful to your spouse. But before you're married, you're being faithful to your spouse. You don't know who he is yet. You don't know who she is yet. So fidelity goes both ways. And one of the reasons, not the only reason, one of the reasons that I have no doubt that Jeff will not be unfaithful to me is because he was willing to be faithful to me all those years and the fidelity goes both ways, and it is a bonding thing in terms of the marriage with each other, and it's gives you a level of trust with one another that that is necessary for a healthy marriage. So years ago, when I was in college, I read a book by, have you ever heard of Elizabeth Elliot? So Elizabeth Elliot was Jim Elliot's wife. Jim Elliot was one of the missionaries killed in Ecuador, and she stayed and then ended up actually bringing the gospel to that group of Aka Indians. But she wrote a book called Passion and Purity. Anybody read it?
We have it.
Yeah. Actually, I think I might have it up back there on the bookshelf for people to read. And it was the love story between Jim Elliot and Elizabeth Elliot. And when she gets to the part where they get married and their wedding night, she just says one thing, one sentence. She says it was unspeakable. And I would echo that it is a unique and unbelievably bonding thing to wait and then to um, have that fidelity toward one another. And, yeah, it's I think has a lot to do with having a marriage where you trust uh, completely, and that's an important thing to have in a marriage. It's an important thing to have in any relationship. I don't know if I've told you about this before, and it doesn't have anything to do with marriage, but I used to play a game with my freshmen. It's called Who Can You Trust? And they would break up into groups, and they would be different countries, and their country would have a name, and their country would have different exports and imports that they needed, and exports that they exported, and all these. There's this whole like bio on each of those countries, and then they would send out emissaries to go have talks with another country. And at the end of those talks about how they would communicate with one another and what they would do for one another, each country would vote on how much trust they had in that other country that they were having, sort of relations with. And invariably, there was some, I don't want to name names, but you can think of people in our school, some kid that just wanted to be trouble, right? That would say, no trust. We have, and this people say, we trust you fully. And they come back with, we don't trust you at all. And it went in 2 days long. And I had students walking out of my room, even the first day, students that had gone to school together, had been best friends since kindergarten, yelling at each other and angry at each other for not trusting each other. Look, if you can do that in a 2-day simulation game with kids that are friends, imagine what happens in a marriage when trust dies. Or if there isn't trust even from the beginning. My sister had a friend whose fiance, a week before the wedding, cheated on her. Now, somebody brought up cheated on someone, and cheating on someone that you're dating or whatever. Cheating because I don't want to talk about it. But I told them, no, for my generation, cheating on someone is you have a significant other, and they sleep with someone else. That's what that means, and that's what he did. He was unfaithful to her, and she's still married.
Wait, found out before the wedding.
And it lasted, I don't know, a few years, but it ended in a fantastic divorce. Not in a good sense of the word. And there was no trust there. How could the marriage work without trust? without, yeah, go ahead.
You said that you consider cheating, like, if you have a significant other and they go sleep with someone else. Couldn't it also be if they have, like, another significant other, like, they're two-timing it?
Yeah, I would say that's two-timing, but when you use the word cheating, it just kind of, at least for my generation, implies having sex with someone. But yeah, that's not right. It's not right. It's not right to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're two-timing. And that's bad. Yes.
Can you, like, cheat, like, on someone else?
Yeah, I think there's something to that. And what's a problem in marriages is when that significant other, or not that significant, that person that you are emotionally attached to, even if you're technically staying faithful to your spouse, especially like if, let's take me, especially if that was a man, but on the other end, it's going to mess up your marriage. On the other end, if it's a man with a woman and he has a wife, that marriage is because you're right. You can have this sort of best friend, but then and have this emotional relationship, not physical. But the person you're supposed to be telling those things to, the person you're supposed to be confiding in, the person you're supposed to be closest to, is that person that you marry. And yeah, I think I don't know that it's cheating, but I know it's kryptonite for a marriage. It would be deadly to a marriage. And I had a situation. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had 2 kids at home. I was pretty isolated, and it was about the time. I know we were going to Brookside already, and maybe I was pregnant. I don't know, but I was pretty isolated. I was starting to homeschool, and I didn't, have a lot of friends, and Jeff and I would go every Wednesday night to church and serve at Awana, and we would do that together. But then he took on the second job of delivering newspapers, and he spent, I don't know, a couple of weeks every morning and being trained. And so his trainer was a woman, and so they're driving around in this car and delivering newspapers. And then the other thing that happened was after Jeff's father died, he stopped going to Awana, and he took his mother out to dinner, which is very sweet every Wednesday night. Now, minus like both things together kind of converged, and everything else, that I was isolated, that I was home alone with the kids all day, that I didn't really have any friends, that I didn't, it all kind of converged. And so you understand this idea of love languages?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are 5 love languages. There's only one that I'm not fluent in. It's acts of service. What do you think, Jeff's? Acts of service. My love languages, and you usually have a maybe like a number 1 and then a number 2. I have number 1A and number 1B. I can't tell you which one is more important, but it's not acts of service. It's quality time and physical touch. And so here I am having 0 quality time because he's working 2 jobs and he's in this car. I wasn't worried about him cheating on me, but he's in the car with this woman, and he's taking his mother out to dinner, and he's never taking me out to dinner. And I got really chippy about this. We had a pretty animated conversation about it, but I didn't handle it particularly well. If I would have just sat down and said, "Sweetie, and that's what I do now when I'm feeling neglected. I say, I'm feeling neglected. You need to spend more time with me." And he'll say, "Let's go out to dinner tomorrow night." So we're much better about it. But I was 20 something or 30 something. I was young, and that was a strain on our marriage. That he was spending quality time, with other people, but not spending quality. The problem wasn't that he was spending time with other people. He wasn't spending time. that made me feel unloved. And that happens in a relationship, and especially in a marriage. And you need to learn how to deal with that in a way that each person honors the other. And as a young married couple, I didn't really know how to do that. And it had something to do with getting married 364 days after our first date. We didn't know each other as well as we could have if we dated longer. But we also didn't know any longer to be married. So we had some of those issues early on in our marriage because of that. I don't even remember what the question was, but did I answer it?
Sure.
Okay, let's just go with that. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about marriage because as believers in Christ, the Bible has advice for marriage. The Bible has, it's more than advice, tells us how marriage is supposed to work. But oftentimes, the whole idea, I think people get more animated over this idea of submission than they do probably just about anything else in the Bible. Because what it ends up being characterized as, and there are marriages like this, but it's not what the Bible's saying, is there's this domineering man who's like, give me my coffee, woman, and ordering around, and she has to do everything he orders her to do, and she's a second-hand person, like she's like second to him, and God loves him more, and he's more important, and that is not what it's talking about. So what I want to do is to read one of those scriptures to you and give you some context about the whole leader, right, of the house and the submission piece. Yeah, we're not talking about that. Okay, so here's Ephesians 5:22-24. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and it is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Now, that word to submit is a Greek word, hupotasso, and it's a military term. It's a term that depicts a group of soldiers walking in formation. I don't know if you've ever been to a parade, a military parade. I've been to many military parades, and they're all walking at the same cadence. They're walking in step with one another in order. So that's the picture of a couple that is walking in lockstep and going in the same direction and walking with each other. Now, it says, husband or wife, submit to your husbands. Now, this is assuming that the man's a believer. It's assuming that the man is going to do his part, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And it only works if both people are living in the way God has ordained it. But here is what submission is not. It is not a man, a domineering man saying, do this, little woman, or whatever it is, coercing or whatever it is. It's not that. It's not this little mousy wife that just sits in the corner and doesn't say anything. Yes, it's not that. And I am living proof that you can be the much stronger personality and still be a submissive. And so it's not about personality. It's not about any of that. Now, most of the time when submission comes in, actually, I would say all of the time, it's in a situation where there's two different ideas of what should happen. And I think I've already alluded to in this class to the time period when we were changing churches. And that was one of the times in our marriage where Jeff was saying God's calling us out. And I was saying, I want to stay at my church. I want to worship with my parents. I want to, and I knew I would submit. But I wanted to submit to him. I really didn't want to. And a couple of things happened. I already told you about going and talking to Stan and Rachel. But one thing that happened was that we decided we would leave after Vacation Bible School because I had committed to be the Bible teacher at Vacation Bible School, and I wanted to, have my yes be yes, as the Bible says, and Jeff agreed to that, and we were like, yeah, okay. So, but he said, look, Vacation Bible School ends on Friday. We're going to a different church. And then when Josh found that out, he started to cry because he was like 5, 6, I don't know, and he wanted to sing. They would sing in front of the church the songs they learned over Vacation Bible School. He wanted to sing with the children's choir, and so I went to Jeff and I said, can we just one more Sunday, and then we can go. And here's what my husband said to me. He didn't say it in an angry way at all. He doesn't do that. He said, Amy, God has called us out of that church. And you don't mess around with God's call. How do I say no? How do I argue? And so we left. I didn't tell the other class this. We went to what is now our church. We went to Brookside Church that first Sunday. And I walked in very self-righteous. I walked in thinking, see what I'm doing for you? Do you see? I'm leaving my family. I'm leaving my church. I'm leaving people I love. I'm leaving the Bible study that I've been teaching. And just, do you see how faithful I am? I'm being submissive to my husband. And I had this attitude of, I'm doing this. And I didn't have a good attitude about doing it. So we get there, and one of the things they do is they commission this young couple with 2 young children who have sold everything they own. And they are going to Bosnia when the war was on in Bosnia to be with Child Evangelism Fellowship to be missionaries for the gospel there. And they're talking, and I am sobbing. Like God just broke me. And as we left the parking lot, I turned to Jeff and I said, I don't know where we're going to go, but I was supposed to be here. Thank you for making sure that we were going to be here today. Thank you for not letting us go back to our church. And so that was a time that was hard. But I submitted, and he was right. And that's usually how it works. But it was never, and the other thing he said to me when what was I pushing back on? I don't know what I was pushing back on. But I said, I said something to him about not wanting to leave. And the other thing he said to me was, I have watched men grow old in that church and not become godly men. And I don't want to be like that. So that's what submission looks like. It doesn't look like a man saying, do this for me, woman. And if you, have some sort of contrarian idea, he has license to kick you out or whatever. It's not about that. It's about 2 people when they aren't in agreement, figure out how to be in agreement. And if someone has to give, I give, even though I'm much more strong-willed than he is. I give. And it's a blessing. Now, ladies, the first thing I'm going to tell you about this next part is his part is way harder than submission. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. The men's part is to love his wife as Christ loved the church and laid his life down. A husband who has laid himself down for his wife, who is serving his wife, who is preferring his wife, who is listening to his wife. Just trust me. It's easy to submit to him because you know he loves you, he wants what is best for you, and he isn't going to try and overpower you or to belittle you or force you into something. And so men are called to be selfless and to lay down their lives for their wife as Christ did for the church, and that's much, much. I told you that Jeff's love language is acts of service. Most nights, when I cook, my job is to cook, which is good because if Jeff cooked, and he does the dishes. It's one way he says, "Oh, he doesn't mind." He never says, "Why don't you do the dishes for us?" I just plop them down and he takes care of it. And years ago, when we first moved into our house that we're in now, Katie was, I don't know, 5 years old maybe, and we had just eaten dinner, and Jeff got up and started taking the dishes over to the sink and started doing the dishes, and I turned to Katie and I said, "Katie, find a man who does the dishes." And she said, "Oh, Mommy, all daddies do the dishes." I go, no, sweetie, yeah, that's not the way things work. And the guy might not do the dishes, but find a man that loves you enough to serve, because that's what he's supposed to do. And if he's domineering you, that's not what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to prefer you over himself. If he's coercing you into something, that's not love. That's not love. He doesn't love you. Doesn't matter what he says. In general, we'll just like off this Shelley Donahue thing right now because this is something she would say. I didn't get it. In general, girls give sex to get love. They don't get love. Boys give love to get sex. They get sex. And they'll tell you they love you to get sex. And girls will do that to feel love. And nobody wins. Everybody loses in that exchange. And that's not a biblical picture of what it is, of what we're supposed to be about as men and women. Women are to submit to their husbands with all those caveats I gave you, and men are to lay down their lives for their wives. Okay. I'm going to stop there. There's not a whole lot left from here. So hopefully we can get that done tomorrow and do a cup of fun on Friday.